one's for you, Morph.
Hello everybody, my name is Cheesymanfredo, and today it's the first episode of the new spin-off podcast series, CheesyManfredo Comic Book Club. I'm Cheesymanfredo, aka Alfredo Morales, and today our first guest and that book they're bringing along is Jim Gizriel from the Jim channel on YouTube. Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, hey, it's me, Jim. My YouTube channel is just my name, Jim Gizriel, and I review movies and talk about movie news and animation and stuff like that.
It's a really good channel. I recommend it if you just want to hear if you just hate it when like a movie reviewer does skits or says a joke. You should check out Jim's channel. He just gives it to you straight.
Well, I do say some jokes, but I guess I don't really do skits.
Yeah.
But,
you don't got it, Jim. It's fine. it's okay. That well is already poisoned. You don't need to.
That's true. More, yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, and today, what comic book are we reading today, Jim?
Well, today we're talking about the Uncanny X-Men storyline, Days of Future Past, which is the issues 141 and 142, written by Chris Claremont, kind of co-plotted by Chris Claremont and John Byrne. It's the end of their historic run together, not the end of Claremont's run, but part of his historic run and their historic run together. And it is a time travel story. It's kind of predates the Terminator. And it's kind of, sorry, my cat walked through.
That's fine.
It kind of predates the Terminator of this kind of dystopian world where like robots will completely take over and destroy us all. But it's sort of different than the Terminator completely because it's more so about how, and maybe because it makes it feel more relevant to right now, how kind of hatred and bigotry would eventually sort of destroy us all.
Definitely. It's very current. Like, if you want to read a comic to escape reality, I don't recommend this one. It's gonna remind you too much of what's going on right now.
No, it's heavy, but it is 2 issues. It's like a quick read, but it's a good read. It's one of my favorite storylines of all of X-Men. It's actually one of the first ones I got into, just because it's really rich. It introduces you to this crazy future world of 2013, which this came out in 1980. So in 1980, 2013 felt like a long time ago. But just gets into like this idea that the Sentinels completely took over. Human society has been destroyed. New York's and Manhattan's just a pile of rubble, which, by the way, at the time was what was going on. Like the Bronx was burning and stuff like that. So this felt like even a reality then too. But I don't know. It's just such it's a good book, and sorry, I'm still recommending it. I should stop.
No, I got you.
Good.
It got based into a movie, kinda. It's like, I would say the movie isn't like, the movie isn't a 1-for-1 adaptation. Well,
they've done it, to my understanding. See, I haven't seen all the X-Men cartoons, but they've done it. They've adapted it to. I should have looked this up, and I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
But they've adapted it both times. They haven't done it because to basically explain this dystopian future, because I just sold the dystopian future part. I didn't sell what the premise was, I guess, is that in Days of Future Past, basically what it is the Kitty Pryde, who's new to the team, is in this dystopian future, and she sends her consciousness back to her young self in 1980, and they have to stop this assassination of Senator Kelly, who will then change the history of the world, which will springboard like a lot of hatred towards mutants, and start and will reactivate the Sentinels and really like mass-produce Sentinels, which will eventually just destroy America. And in Kitty Pryde, it was a character Claremont loved. Like, he loved Kitty Pryde a lot. She's a cool character. I don't think he was wrong about that. But anytime they make an adaptation of it, they basically don't do Kitty Pryde because they want it to be Wolverine or Bishop or somebody else. So I sort of wish they would do Kitty Pryde because I think she's a cool character. I actually wish there was more of a direct adaptation of this because it seems like it'd be easy since it's 2 issues. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
maybe like
no, they don't do that. They kind of sexy it up, I guess.
yeah. I guess, well, like, I mean, that's like the problem with like anything, with any kind of mainstream film. It's like, okay, well, we got to pick the character that everyone identifies with. Oh, Wolverine, right? Like,
Yeah.
the majority of the X-Men movies are like Wolverine movies, right? Like,
Yeah.
he's had like 6 of them.
I heard a screenwriter talk about how the X-Men movies are really, when you write them, it's really Wolverine and the X-Men. It's not the X-Men.
Right.
And the only one that I would say is just an X-Men movie is X-Men First Class.
Oh
The
yeah.
rest, maybe that Phoenix movie, but I don't want to talk about that. The most recent one. I don't want to get into that. I don't want to be bummed out. But the because I think those are the only 2 where Wolverine doesn't have a significant. I think in Apocalypse he still is in that one scene, but in First Class he only has a cameo, and that to me is like the best just X-Men movie. But yeah, you kind of have to do Wolverine's the focus, and then there's these other people, which is not what the comic was like. I was disappointed
No,
in
like,
that. Although I love Hugh Jackman, but it's
I
not
mean,
his fault.
yeah,
He didn't write it.
who doesn't like Hugh Jackman?
Yeah.
I think think, I guess we could just, I guess, all right. So I guess before we actually dwell way more into the book, just telling you that after this point is like more spoilers. So if you want, you could pause it now and actually read the book. It isn't really hard to find.
No.
It's especially if you don't give a shit about the law and just want to pirate it. It's like the easiest shit to find.
Or if you want to go legal, I actually do have Marvel Unlimited, and it's a great service, and you get years and years of comics. And I think there's a free trial, and this is short enough that there's no way you could read them and cancel it. So
Oh yeah, definitely. Did they do the kind of like the other streaming service where like the first week or so is free or something? Or
I think it's been a bit, so I forget what it was, but I feel like they do. So if you need that, I would do it.
yeah,
It's worth it, and you get like a ton of comics. I mean, what's wrong about that?
Yeah.
And they're in good shape and digitally mastered and all that stuff. So it's not the worst thing in the world. I'll say that, especially if you like Marvel.
okay, 100. Yeah, check that out. All right. So I guess before we go into your more I guess older take about this comic, I guess I'll go into my first impressions of reading it, and it's
Okay.
I'm surprised of how short it was.
Had you read it before?
I've heard of it. It's one of those like runs, like if you know anything about like comics, like Marvel comics, any superhero comics, and they tell you about the big arcs, the arcs that everyone like knows, like Gwen Stacy's death, when Galactus came to Earth, I guess Days of Future Past too, right? They make them seem
No.
big and grand, like, oh damn, oh, like it was like a hard trial, but then you find out it's just 2 issues, and you're like, wait, hold up. So it's like, I don't know, I guess like if you just heard that, I guess it feels like it makes it seem like it's not that important. But if you go more into the writer Chris Claremont, he tends to do that a lot. He never like stays on a story for too long. Well, that's what he says in interviews. I haven't read a lot of his run. I've only read like what was in this digital version of the trade paperback that I'm reading that has a couple more stories. And just to show you like how short each story is, like two issues ago, before Days of Future Past, they were in hell with Doctor Strange fighting off demons for like 2 issues, and then after that everything goes back to normal. And it's like I guess if you're more used to like, I guess because I come from a generation that grew up reading more manga than like American comics, like anything that is like a big thing kind of like lingers a little bit or is like pretty long,
Yeah.
like
Well, I think
yeah, go on.
one of the reasons this is shorter one, it seemed like the artist he was working with, John Byrne, I think they knew he was going to leave, or that relationship was sort of over. And that, to give you, I guess, a bit of history, less, I don't know,
No,
sorry, not to
no,
like,
go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
not to talk down to the kids, but they'd literally just finished a huge arc, which was the whole Phoenix saga, which lasted years and years. um and there's a lot of stories within the Phoenix saga, like there's like arcades in there, and the Hellfire Club and all this stuff. It's like crazy what's going on with the Phoenix saga, but it went on for a very long time. So I feel like this was sort of, and also the other thing with the Phoenix saga is, I think people don't realize about Claremont's run is that X-Men, when he started, was like the number, like, not a major title at all, and they really weren't a big title. And by the end of the Phoenix saga, it was the number one comic in the
Did,
world.
didn't X-Men it get that one got did it get I heard it got canceled pretty early, right? Or like
Yeah, it got canceled in the late '60s, early '70s, and then Giant Size was the comeback,
mm-hmm,
because they saw it was like, I think it was either it was selling a little better, and they knew they could, reboot it, and so
mm-hmm.
they did. And Claremont didn't do Giant Size. There's like rumors he helped, but I don't know how true that is. But he came on pretty early after that, and then he just hit the ground running. But Days of Future Past was sort of the first. There's like, I think, 3 issues between this and the end of Phoenix. Like, that's how close it is. Like, as
Oh
you read
yeah.
it, they mention how Storm's the new it's the leader, because Cyclops just left,
Mm-hmm.
and Kitty Pryde's just new. So it's like kind of a weird time, you'd think, to put something out like this. But I think it's also that, like, this was sort of their victory lap. They're like, hey, we're like the number one comic in the world, and nobody thought we'd be here, and now we're the coolest kids in the industry. Let's do something really out there. And so that's kind of like, I think. But it is, I will say, in that Phoenix arc, there's a lot of smaller stories within it, but that's just like kind of how comics were then. They didn't do the big arcs. Like, now they love doing the
I
arcs. It's like all they're about, all they do now,
yeah,
which,
yeah, I think
there's
that
good and bad to that.
there's an interview, there's several interviews with Chris Claremont, cuz after reading the story, I'm like, damn, that felt pretty short. I'm gonna have to like look into Chris Claremont interviews, so I got something to talk about, because I don't know if I
Mhm.
could say that much about the story itself. But Chris Claremont was talking about that's what he feels like is the problem with like modern comics. It's like you go to a rack and it's like currently part 58 of a bigger arc, and it's like, well, how are you supposed to get into that, right?
Well, wait. He really said that?
He said, yeah, he said that in the cartoonist kayfabe interview. Have you heard about that podcast?
I don't know that podcast, but I find that interesting because one of the things I like about his run, especially towards the end of it when you get into the '80s, is it gets so convoluted and so continuity heavy. You literally can't pick up an issue without having read like 10 years. It's like, so like, you're like, I think by the end of the '80s, like, the X-Men are in the Australian outback, and they have this guy called Gateway who opens portals for them, and they go all over the place, and like they're doing all this crazy stuff. And like, it's so weird that he would say that, because in the '80s Marvel hated that he was so continuity heavy. He was just like, he was so into that. And I liked it because it made it, if you read the whole run, it's like such a treat when you get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
But unless you've read, like, I mean, that's a commitment, and I'm not saying most people don't want to do that, but it's, I guess, because he did write shorter stories and he was criticized for it. But I am like, I remember people who didn't like his run because they're like, yeah, I don't know what issue to pick up, because I'm like, wait, who's this and what's going on? And they were in the Siege Perilous, and why is Psylocke Asian all of a sudden, and like, I don't understand what's going on right now. It's like, so that's weird he would say that, but maybe
Maybe,
because he was criticized for it.
maybe I butchered it, or maybe I'm butchering what he's saying, or maybe I've just not remember it. But I do remember him saying something like that in that same interview. It's kind of like every time when he talks about his writing, he doesn't really talk about his writing. He more seems to like pitch like fanfic ideas most often. It
Oh,
seems like,
really?
yeah, because I think he seems like he's seen like every current MCU movie, because he mentions them a lot. Like, oh yeah, I was watching Black Panther, and then I was thinking like, oh, if they can include Storm in this, how would I write her into this movie? And then he pitches this idea of how he's gonna include Storm inside Black Panther, and it's,
Jesus.
yeah, yeah, go on.
He's an interesting guy. I mean, I get why he thinks that because he was the toast of the town
Mm-hmm.
from the 70s, 80s, 90s. I actually met him once when I was a little kid.
Nice.
And I got to hang out with him. And it was right after he got fired from X-Men.
Yeah.
And nobody showed up to this signing, which isn't because he wasn't. I don't know why no one showed up. They promoted it. It just didn't work out for whatever reason. But it was like me, my dad, and my sister, and we hung out with him for like an hour because no one was there, and he was really nice. And like, even I was just into Wolverine, because I was a kid.
Yeah, who wasn't? Who wasn't into Wolverine?
Yeah, and he like hardcore pitched me Kitty Pryde, and he was like, "This is why Kitty Pryde's my favorite character," and he like explained it, and it was like, I knew how big a deal he was, and it sort of changed how I thought of the female characters in X-Men because suddenly I was like, well, he's the guy, and like my 9-year-old head was like, if he likes this is his favorite, maybe I'm reading it wrong. Like made me like definitely like a mind-blowing sort of moment. And I was into the New Mutants, which I think I've told you, but the New Mutants, and I sort of like Danny Moonstar, and he was like thought that was cool and stuff like that. And I've actually been in a room with him a few times, but I've never mentioned it because I don't want him to say I don't know what you're talking about, because that would be crushing, because it was like this big moment for me as a kid and like meeting this huge creator and spending time with him. So I think one time he was like, these are good cookies, and I was like, they are good cookies, Chris Claremont, highly influential figure person. It's like we just talked about double stuffed Oreos, so the other times were not as impactful. But that time was like, and he actually, my dad has the first whatever the first issue of Days of Future Past, we got that signed that day. So it was a cool day. He's very nice. He was a little bitter because the Marvel thing, but he was hung out with a 9-year-old for an hour. I mean, in a comic book store.
It's better than nothing, I guess.
Yeah, no, he's a nice guy. I've always appreciated him. He's a great guy. Anyway,
he wrote the book. He was on that book for a long time, right? Like, was it? I heard 20 years. Is that right?
Yeah, he was there from the 70s till he was fired because I guess they couldn't pay him and Jim Lee when they made. It's just called X-Men because there's Uncanny, which he was writing on, and then they made X-Men. Then they fired him, which I think was because they couldn't pay his salary and Jim Lee's at the same time. And Jim Lee, I think, was pretty shocked that they chose that because he was the guy.
Right.
And they brought him back later, but I think his initial run, and if you're into comics and you're into the X-Men, it's like, to me, I'm very behind. I haven't read the Grant Morrison stuff, unfortunately, and the more recent stuff. But to me, like that, I've read his run like a bunch of times in my life, especially when I was a kid. But I read it, God, it's probably been like 15 years. But I have read it a bunch of times, and it's a long read. It's going to take you a while, and you got to hit X Factor and New Mutants and all these other things. But if you can do it, it's well worth it, because when you get to the end, you're like, wow, that was an accomplishment. Like, that was crazy, all the things he tackled. But I think to bring it back to Days of Future Past, I think what works great about that one is it gets more into, right after you've done the whole Phoenix thing, which is more about power and the morals of power and all those things, which are important in comics. But I think this one more is about what X-Men, even though people laugh at it a little now, what X-Men's really about is intolerance and, them trying to fight that. And Days of Future Past is such an extreme version of that, but I think it shows like how bad it can really go. And, I think also, when I read it the first time, it was the 90s. The Rodney King stuff was a little more.
Oh shit!
It wasn't that current. I'm not that old, but it was.
All right.
It was within a couple years. Gangster rap had all that imagery within it, and I remember feeling like that was like highly possible. But I was also a kid. I was like 8 or 9 when I was like like 7, 8, and it definitely felt like important and serious. But I still think it has that in it. But what's interesting is like when you think of the other post-apocalyptic things, like Terminator or Road Warrior or other ones. Anyway,
other bad future movies. Yeah, I guess Planet of the Apes could count as one.
Oh, that's true. Okay, that's true as well. But I think all of them, it's not, specific. This one's specifically America, but this one is about like no, like effectively their hatred of mutants is what destroyed them. It's like, whoa, that's what's kind of stuck to me about this story, because at first I liked the sci-fi element, but then I'm also like, that's like pretty bad. Like that's like sad and depressing, but it also makes you go, oh damn, like I don't know, like could that happen? Like especially like now I was reading it while helicopters were flying over me, so
oh yeah, it's very, I got helicopters flying me over here. It reminds you of like the Sentinels flying around looking for mutants.
Yeah, it's like, anyway, yeah, what were you
I was gonna say, like, I think the Sentinels as a concept work pretty well as kind of like an AI that's just designed to hate, and like how kind of like hate never really stops. It kind of like it kind of just changes, like and it's a good example of kind of like how like fascism works, like because like I guess big examples of fascism like the Nazis, right? Like they hated the Jews. Do you really think they would have stopped if they wiped out all the Jews? No, they would have kept looking for something else, and that works well with the Sentinels, because at first it's just mutants, but then it's like people who gave birth to mutants, and then it's like people who have latent mutant genes, and that could be anyone in the Marvel universe, right? So the kind of like the net of hatred just kind of like grew and grew, and eventually it would just like just wipe out like everything. Like Sentinels like were just kind of like the rulers of the land in Days of Future Past. Although I think it implies that it's just happening in America, because
because the nuclear, they say, which I always forget the nuclear missile thing. I'm just like doesn't this suck enough? Like we don't need the nuclear missile part. Every time I always forget that, and every time I read it, I'm like, oh, it's not just that this is awful. It's that
it's just like,
it's that literally the world will end.
True that. Because
let's add this on to. Nothing sounds more 2020 than the idea of Sentinels ruling everything, and then they're like, let's just throw this on too, and you're like, what the fuck?
It's like, that's I guess more accurate to today, because it's all like, we're in a global pandemic right now, but there's still the climate crisis that's currently going on, so it's like layers of possible destructions.
Yeah, but so it's basically like because the Sentinels are going to go to other countries, and the other countries are like, if that happens, we're going to bomb America, basically, and wipe it off the face of the earth. But obviously, if they do that, then the Sentinels will retaliate, and then it'll just become this whole thing. And it is specifically America, which it's interesting that I think X-Men doesn't play as specifically American. I think it's a little broader in what it's doing.
Well, the team is very international. Like they come from all parts of the world, right?
Yeah, but they're hated in all parts of the world.
Oh yeah, true.
It's like, but it seems like they do more with America than I think. You don't think of it as just an American thing, but it does specify quite a bit, especially in this one. It's, I don't know. It's I know in that when I heard that joke in Deadpool 2, there's like, an outdated metaphor for racism, and I was like, I don't know if I know if I agree with that. I sort of like that.
I feel like it can still broad. Apply. I mean, like any metaphor, it's like the X-Men is still not like a one-for-one metaphor of real kind of like, I guess, struggles of minorities in the country, right? Because in real life, like racism isn't logical. Like, I feel like that's a problem with a lot of like fantasies where they kind of try to like rationalize like racism, like kind of like how Bright tried to handle it, and that was pretty garbage.
Oh well,
Like,
Bright was yeah, Bright was really bad. No, I mean, I think that theirs is trying to say, oh well, it could be about homophobia or racism
oh
or transphobia, or it could be like anything. Basically, it's like, or if you're just like picked on at school just because you like are weird, you know, it's like that, which is probably why that comic became so successful.
yeah, everyone can
For so
relate to
long.
the X-Men. It's
Yeah,
very relatable.
I mean, I will say, as a kid, I used to joke that I was like sort of liberally indoctrinated by Marvel Comics because like I was always like, if someone would say like some like slur or something, I'd always be like, but like that's like the people who hate the X-Men, and like why would you do? I was like totally like I was like why would you hate Wolverine? Like so like you would, I don't know, in my mind, not that I would do that one for one, but it just like that association just made me go. I was like, no, fuck you, man. Like, what the fuck? Like, I don't. Why would you want to be those guys? Like,
I don't hate Wolverine because he's a mutant. I hate him because he's Canadian. Wait, give me 1 second. Marvel has always like been very progressive, even like from the start. Like when Captain America was first published, like there were people who protested against Captain America because
Yeah.
they made the bad guy Nazi Germany, and like at that point we weren't in World War II, so we didn't like quote unquote hated the Nazis, even though like America never really hated the Nazis, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there was a Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden right before, so there were Nazis in America then.
Yeah.
Do you know the story about Jack Kirby and the Nazis who came to fight him?
I saw like there's this artist I'm a big fan of. His name is Tom Scioli, and he's gonna pretty soon they're gonna publish. He's been working on like a comic biography of Jack Kirby, and he's been releasing like little snippets and previews on his Instagram. And there was like a segment where I got the info from, where like, oh yeah, they went to the Marvel offices with signs saying like, hey, why did you make Nazi Germany the bad guy in Captain America? The Germans are our friends. And I think they were like calling the offices to complain, and Jack Kirby's all like, oh yeah, well like come down to the office and try to kick my ass, and like no one showed up.
Yeah, yeah. I like that he was ready to go. That's Jack Kirby.
Yeah, he came. Yeah, lower income housing. He just had to learn how to fight, you know.
Yeah. No, I think they really wanted to change stuff with comics, but it's also like they could be progressive because, you know, at the time it was looked at as an inferior medium, and so no executives were gonna fight them, you know. And it's like, and they knew that, like, you know, even in the late 60s when we had these revolutionaries and protest people, like Marvel was considered like pretty cool among that movement. Like they liked like the Hulk and, you know, Fantastic Four and stuff, because it wasn't as lame as most mainstream people thought it was. They thought it was cool because it was accepting, and even like just the day Stanley died, when people would get mad at him for like that Comicsgate thing, he was like, no, I'm not with you. I like, you know,
Yeah,
diversifying comics. Like he would have loved. I feel bad. Like I watched Spider-Verse with my daughter last week, and I was like, I was like, when I was watching it, because that film's so much about acceptance and stuff. And like, I remember it's cool that like kids can watch that and go, anyone could be Spider-Man, which is like crazy. Like, because they used to not let anyone other than Peter be Spider-Man, you know, and now it's like anyone could be. It's like feels like so amazing, and I'm like, I wish Stanley had gotten to see that, because that's like something he really stood for. You know, he's a questionable person, but
I mean,
that
like,
he was always. There's other issues with him.
Yeah,
but,
look, he was pretty like we go back. People were pretty progressive, but they do kind of have like the more like boomer kind of like conservative kind of like takes or stuff. Because I think okay, after this point, I guess we'll go more into the book. But like, did you ever hear about there was like an article going around talking about how like the writing and the artwork in like the Fantastic Four didn't seem to like match up, because there was this reoccurring thing where like every time like Sue Storm would like save one of the male characters from like a person, the dialogue was like, thanks, Sue, but you didn't have to do that. I had like the magical stop the bad guy button in my pocket the whole time, and it's like it's
Yeah.
and I think that's because of the Marvel method, and you know about the Marvel method, right, Jim?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, where I guess I'll describe it to the audience. The Marvel method. So back in the day, because Stanley was like writing like 15 books at the same time, he didn't have time to do all that. So what he did was that he would write a synopsis, give it to his artist, and say, "Draw whatever you want based on the synopsis." Then I'm gonna go in there and write the dialogue. So you can actually go back and read like older Marvel comics and kind of see how sometimes like the picture and the like the word balloons or the dialogue boxes kind of don't match that well sometimes, you know? And like that article like was pointing that out.
I mean, they weren't perfect. I'm gonna say that.
I mean, they weren't perfect, but
there's certain issues like that. Stan Lee especially, it's more like what he set up. I will say that, because other than like when Galactus shows up in Fantastic Four and some of the cosmic stuff and stuff like that, those are pretty perfect in my mind, even when I reread them. But then there's other times when they'll say something to Sue and you're like, ugh.
Yeah,
Jesus.
it's just
but I think like at least like in a lot of those I'm like, at least your heart was in the right place, and when you were asked to say something about things should change, they're like, yeah, they should. I agree with, like, they were never, the only thing he was bad at was crediting people, and
oh yeah, well
that's
a whole
that's a whole other thing. But yeah, but he was not, even to the before he died, like people would get in his face about it, go, nope, it was all me, and you're like, Stan.
I think Jack said that in an interview too. They asked him if he created Spider-Man or something. You ever heard that story of like him possibly creating Spider-Man?
I've heard that, but to me, I think it's. I want to say I don't think Stan Lee doesn't deserve. I think he he deserves some credit.
No, Stan Lee. I feel like he actually wrote the dialogue. He actually did something. I don't think Stan was like a bad writer. Everyone was like copying Stan.
I mean, he is sort of a bad writer, but he's not. But that's Ditko, Steve Ditko, because you read those early Spider-Mans, that's not Kirby. Like that aesthetic, the way he drew.
Oh wait, no, I mean, okay, there's no, I'm not saying that like Jack Kirby literally created like the iconic suit. I mean, no, there's this whole it's like a rumor that like, so back in the day they would just pump out so many characters that they'll have a filing cabinet of just potential characters, and I think like Jack drew a character that doesn't look nothing like current Spider-Man, but was called Spider-Man. He kept it in a filing cabinet, and when they needed a character, they popped that out. And I think Steve Ditko redesigned it. Supposedly, these are all like rumors, right? What
I've always heard is they asked Kirby first. Stanley looked at his design and didn't like it, and then he went to Ditko, and then Ditko made it.
I believe that. That sounds about right.
But I know that when the Stanley Jack Kirby thing got really heated, then Jack Kirby claimed the Spider-Man thing, which I was like, I really wish he hadn't done that, because that really muddies the waters of an argument that.
Yeah.
I don't know, that argument. I mean, we could literally do a podcast on how they hate each other, but I will say, I think if I was them, that argument represents so much in terms of creator rights in comics and the difference between writers and artists, and it represented so much to so many generations, that argument, that I really wish Stan had been the better man in the end and just figured out a way to make good, because in a way that argument is why Image Comics happened, and it's why a lot of creators, there was that shift. Now in some ways that shift is good, but I think they should have maybe worked it out for the kids or something. It's like they should have. Anyway, sorry. Anyway, we shouldn't move on. I'm sorry.
But
on Stan Lee, did you have anything to add before we move on?
All I want to say is that Spider-Man belongs to the people. That's the real author credit right there.
That's true. I agree with that.
Okay, so let's.
He does.
Yes, agree. Let's talk about Days of Futures Past now.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
So so like in the first page, I really like the if you look at the first page of Days of Future Past, like they have the logo Days of Future Past on the side of the building, like it's made out of like whatever the material of the building is made out of, right?
Yeah.
I like that. Also like that Wolverine shows up. He's got that like rugged look, and I think he mentioned something about like a Canadian like resistance front or something. So
Yeah,
like
they refer to a lot of stuff in this that you never see. You don't really. They don't explain.
right, a
You
lot of
know.
it's kind of like implied. There's like little Easter eggs, like when Kitty Pryde passes by like tombstones, and there's like names of like Fantastic Four members on the tombstone.
I mean, they do that in the famous cover
Oh
where you see
yeah,
like all the X-Men where it's like slain, apprehended, slain, all this stuff.
oh
But
yeah,
yeah, then you see the whole the tombstones, and you kind of see like I think it's all the Fantastic Four. Sorry, I'm looking at yeah
yeah, because
Nightcrawler. I
there's
think
a big Fantastic Four kind of element in this comic too, because Franklin Richard is like part of their um like little like team to try to go back in time, and the Sentinels like home base is the Baxter building
yeah.
because of its like advanced technology, right? So they use that to their benefit.
I mean, Franklin Fantastic Four has always been sort of close to X-Men.
I know
Not, I mean,
John Byrne like he drew Fantastic Four for like a good while, right?
yeah, he let. I think I don't know if that was he did Fantastic Four right after this, but he did do it in the '80s. But Fantastic Four is like a cool book. Like I
Mm-hmm.
know they're sort of weird and a little lame and stuff, but they're a cool book. So I get it, and also I think so they could use Franklin Richards, and I think this is the first appearance. I'm not 100% of Rachel Summers.
Oh yeah,
Um,
she currently goes by the Phoenix now in modern books.
yeah, and she would eventually come. I don't know how she got to the past later, but she eventually in the '80s came in, and she has a really cool introduction.
She has,
Sorry, I'm diverging so much,
no,
but
it's fine. There's yeah, it's just
it
this book is just two issues, so there's if we could add more meat
okay.
to the conversation, I'm okay with it.
Okay, so in this, they did this cool thing in. So when X-Men was running, you had New Mutants running at the same time, and Claremont's writing both for. He wrote New Mutants for 50 issues,
Hmm.
um, and in one of the issues in the same month, they have Rachel Summers goes to X Mansion and knocks on the door,
Yeah.
and they have that happen, and the New Mutants answer the door, but she's like an X-Men character, so you get that door answer from New Mutants perspective, and then in X-Men you get it from her perspective, and it's like totally. I sort of love that like they added this little detail because it's like you sort of get like they're like that's who's this weird person, that was weird, whatever, and then in hers she's like what, how could this be the past, and that person's alive, and like all this stuff, so you get like both. So if you were reading both, you got like this cool little weird crossover that they're not going to hype up who answered the door, but
Oh, I mean, if you read Days of Future Past, like the character of Rachel Summers is kind of, she's not that major, I guess. She's
yeah,
she's kind of a bit part almost.
I mean she gets Kitty Pride back in time, but she does.
Oh yeah, wait,
She's
yeah,
the
never
only.
mind. Yeah, she does, never forgot.
No, it's okay. She's the only character who is original in the
Hmm.
future because everyone else is just older of someone we already know, like
Hmm.
Franklin Richards or Magneto or
Yeah, yeah.
Storm or all that. That's the only like different. Maybe like the humans who attack Kitty Pride, but that's it.
It also does the whole thing where I I feel like this is a trope, but I can't think of anything else that's been in where like we like in a show or a series we go into the future and like one of the bad guys is like on the good guys team now. Like Magneto is like now in a ironically now Magneto's in a wheelchair, right? And he's helping
Yeah.
the X-Men, right? And I wonder if this is the first time something like that's happened. Like doesn't that, like, I don't know, is it crazy, or that feels like that's like a trope where, like, in the future the bad guy's like on the good guy's team?
What else has that happened?
I feel like that's been in other things, but I can't put it.
If it might come from this. Oh, this is also. I don't know if you read this,
Hmm.
but this is a lot of people have said very influenced by a Doctor Who episode.
Really?
Do you
Was it
know about this?
was Chris Claremont a Doctor Who fan?
Apparently it was more John Byrne,
Oh,
and
okay.
he apparently he. I mean, they were dorks, and it was
Yeah.
this. It was it was sorry, it was the 80s. So Doctor Who, and this was, I believe it's John Pertwee era of Doctor Who.
Is,
Yes, it's called Day of the Daleks, and he realized he had done it later. He went and he realized he had lifted the spine, is what he said.
well, that's,
Because John Byrne sort of came up with the plot, and Chris Claremont filled this out basically in the
I,
Marvel method.
I get. I guess that does make sense of what you're telling me about Chris Claremont's like long arcs, and I guess this being a shortest story. Um, that's
Yeah,
cool. I didn't know that. That's
yeah. It's kind of like, I didn't know it until a couple of years ago, um, and it's sort of a forget the episode of Doctor Who, but it's basically like they go back and like the Daleks have sort of taken over and all this stuff.
it,
I
they,
think.
they got to go back
I should,
to stop the Daleks from like taking over.
you know what? I should have read the plot of this one.
No, wait,
Anyway.
isn't that every episode of Doctor Who? Is they got to go back to stop the Daleks?
No, they don't.
I don't see like 5
They,
episodes of Doctor Who.
okay. They try to diversify the villains a little bit. It's the Cybermen. The Daleks are the big villain.
Yeah,
Daleks.
there's a little
Um,
fuck, damn, I gotta. There's a
they're the
little.
main.
Yeah, there's the little
rogue
trash can things. They're like they're like they're like in a 50s like monster movie design that they just stuck around. It never really changed, which I kind of dig. Um, but
Well,
anyway,
I think they sort of had to because of marketability. But anyway,
I mean,
I don't.
I love the design, but anyway,
But they. Sorry, where were you going? Sorry.
I was gonna say I like the panel where they send Kitty back in time, like the white panel that's like red and like, oh, it's like circles. You know what panel I'm talking about? It's like on.
Yeah, where she goes back to the past.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool because it's sort of like this like weird like whoa,
Yeah,
like,
it's like, yeah, you could hear that sound effect was perfect, by the way. No, woo,
sorry.
no, that's
I
really
just
good.
always imagine it like sort of the early Doctor Who theme is playing or something, like that's sci-fi. Is this also like, I think when people read comics of this era, they forget like what science fiction was like back then. And it's different. It's so different
Yeah,
than now.
X-Men is a very like when people think X-Men, they think like of the whole social commentary about the X-Men, but X-Men was very sci-fi. They fought like a lot of aliens. Like they were always fighting aliens.
Yeah, they did a lot of sci-fi stuff. I think it's also because you can't. I'm glad Claremont didn't do too much of one thing, because you would have probably gotten bored with it if it was 100%, anti-mutant muty. That's what they always call them. If mutant storylines, and then they'll switch from like, let's fight the Brood, or let's deal with the Phoenix, or let's.
They fight demons at one point. They fight demons like several times. Now I think about it.
Yeah, they change it up quite a bit, and so, but then I think all his specifically like mutant hatred stuff is very impactful, because he waits, and sort of when he does do it, it's like really cool. Like it's either the Mutant Massacre, or this, or oh man, I just had it on the tip of my tongue, the graphic novel one. Damn it.
I don't know what you're thinking of. I was gonna say that I guess this arc is a pretty good example of that balance between like the big sci-fi, like the time travel story, but also relating back to the social commentary. Because like they got to go back in time to stop the fascist state from growing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, oh, sorry. What I was gonna say is this graphic novel called God Loves, Man Kills, which is the what X-Men 2 is sort of based on. The X-Men 2 movie.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, and this is a lot about fascism, but it sort of reminds me a lot of Terminator,
Mm-hmm.
and the Skynet thing, but it's almost like in Terminator they're like, no, we took over and realized humans are destroying the world, so we need to destroy them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why they killed them. I forget. Anyway, it doesn't matter with Terminator. But in this, it's like, oh, well, we let these robots, segregate the
Right.
mutants, and then their computer program made hatred even worse, which is like, I guess, a bizarre
It
an even worse scenario than like when they have a bot do a Twitter and they see what will happen if a computer program goes through social media and they always become like racists at the
right.
end or
Yeah. It's
something.
like it just these robots just end up racist. We don't know why.
Yeah, and it's like the Sentinels are like the worst in this story, are like the worst version
Mm-hmm.
of that, because they're like, well, if we're gonna kill mutants, we have to kill Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four and the Avengers,
Right.
and we have to kill, and then we have to do this. We have to like, you know, make everything genetically pure and like all this creepy shit, and
Right.
you're like, holy crap.
Yeah. It's like it's such a. This might be more accurate than like a term or like they even did that like in the second Avengers movie, Age of Ultron, where it's like, oh yeah, to save the humans, we gotta destroy the humans, right? Like they run on this train of thought, but with
Yeah,
I feel like the Sentinels might be a little bit more accurate to like current. It's more accurate to like the realistic like. No, people just kind of hate, and they'll go to extreme extents to like keep the hate growing, you know.
yeah, 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 and let it permeate, and like, I mean, it is interesting, especially now with like, I'm sorry if we are getting political,
No,
but
it's fine. It's like, look, X Men. Like, if anyone complains about X Men being political, they don't read X Men. They
yeah.
probably haven't seen the movies.
Well, I don't know. I kind of think all art, in a certain perspective, is
I
political.
Yeah, I agree too.
When people say that, I'm always more disappointed. I'm like, so you didn't, were you not really watching it this whole time? Like, that's what I'm always like, it's like, so you just like missed all this. Like,
Do do you
that's, it's less that I think you were living this utopia. It's just more that I think you're fucking stupid. Like,
two
that you just,
two
anyway, sorry.
examples I could think of about scenarios like that was like when the Watchmen of when the HBO Watchmen series started, and like the Rorschach fanboys turned out to be like white supremacists, and everyone's all like, why are they white supremacists? All like, did you not read the book? Like they were
Yeah.
he's clearly going down the path. Like he was
Yeah.
reading like a fascist like newspaper that like sounded like modern day Alex Jones if you go back and read
Well,
it.
the, yeah, I don't know. Watchmen, I think, is an interesting one in that I don't know if that comic should have become what it became, in that
You think it
it's
got
sort of, it's, what?
you think it got the more popular it got, the worse it was for everybody else, or
Well, sort of. I think it's just like, that's a comic that's based on other comics.
mm-hmm.
And like, I got that when I read it because I had been reading comics for like 10 years. But like,
Mm-hmm.
when other people read it, I'm always like confused, because I'm like, I wish people they wouldn't say it's the best graphic novel, because people go, well, I've never read a graphic novel, so I'll read this one. And I'm like, no, could you not start here?
It's
Could you like read a few things, then you can, there's like, I would like you to like, it just, to me, it's like, not to be like a gate, I'm not trying to gatekeep, but it's just like, I think there's a lot of things in there, and that's why I think people go, it's just dark and broody. And I'm like, no, it's like, Nixon's still president. Like, how did you think this wasn't political? Like, they destroyed Vietnam, and like like that thing is very political. I did notice, but look at like that series, what it did with the Tulsa, uh, what
the
happened,
Tulsa like massacre when they burned down
the
Black
Tulsa,
Wall Street. Yeah.
yeah, when that I sort of had heard about it, but I think the genius of that is everyone knew, and we make YouTube content, so we know.
Yeah.
Everyone knew they were going to have breakdowns of every episode of Watchmen. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's just how the industry works.
Right.
So this is maybe I'm not. I don't think this is a tinfoil hat theory. I think it's a decent theory.
Okay.
I think they knew if we put this in here, every nerd website and even mainstream website is then going to have an article about this, and so they'll all be educated on it. And I was like, and that's exactly what happened. If you look at, like, I've seen so many people bring that up in the past week. It's because, like, they wanted to read about it, because it's like it made a massacre that we should have known about, part of like fan theory, and then suddenly you woke people up, which I think is like actually positive. And and to really show it, I don't think there'd been a good movie TV adaptation of that until that Watchmen show, right?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I heard about it, I saw like I think it was a Vox video about it that someone shared on Facebook. It was like a 10-minute long video talking about it, and how like we like now that whole area is like a parking lot or something. People don't even know it. People don't even know it happened, right? Which is crazy. Damn, I had another point about.
Yeah, sorry, we're like going all over the place.
No, I mean it's fine. It's all good. This is like the first episode of this.
Okay.
Okay. No, what I say to people is like, if you're gonna read Watchmen, also read V for Vendetta. If you're gonna go like in that like direction,
Yeah.
Because I feel like people get the wrong idea from Watchmen, and I feel like V for Vendetta does kind of like a better job of like, to me that kind of helps like, what's the word? It like, not retrospective. It like just kind of like puts a lot of like what Alan Moore was kind of like saying, in Watchmen into more perspective, because I feel like V for Vendetta is more like pro like what Alan Moore's like real political ideology is, you know. I feel like people. Yeah, go on.
I would agree, but I kind of would almost say like, not to be like.
No, go on. No, it's fine.
No, not to start them off too simply, but I would be like, why don't? Sometimes I'm like, why don't they just read like a good Batman comic, storyline, and like get into that, and then like I wouldn't mind like a year one or something like that, and then like
that'd probably be a good start.
Build it up. But I think you're right. It's like they shouldn't stop with Watchmen and just take it at face value.
Yeah. Watchmen's sadly become one of those books that's like, it's the adult comic, it's what the adults read, right? It's like, well, the adult can like read whatever they want, really.
Yeah, and they shouldn't have made the movie. They should have waited till Marvel was more of a thing. Anyway,
true.
I wish they had waited on that, but anyway, there's a lot of. Anyway, so Days of Future Past.
Days of Future Past. Damn, I had something else about I was gonna say about it. What have we not talked about? Days of Future Past. Anything you want to bring up, Jim?
I guess one of the things I find interesting about this is, one is like that the person, when you read it, Kelly, you kind of think, because he died. I forget if we knew who he was before this in the continuity of the comics. When you're reading it, you kind of assume when he dies, like, he doesn't hate mutants so much. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they have to save sort of a bigot to save the world.
Yeah, it's very like
an extra bit of irony. Because I think even when she's trying to save him, he's like saying like shitty things about her. I was just like, this is remarkable, because it's like, that's, to me, that's like, that feels very like 2020.
Yeah, that does feel like very 2020. If like someone had to go back in time and stop Trump from getting assassinated. I'm pretty sure I could say that on the podcast.
If you say you stop, I think it's okay.
Yeah, like it's hypothetical. This is just like we're talking about comics. Yeah. I'm not talking about real life. But anyway.
Yeah. But it is sort of like that kind of a politician who you'd be like, you would not think they would have importance on keeping this thing alive, but it's like, which makes it more depressing.
It's like it's like some people, I guess, are more dangerous as martyrs than like they are in real life. Although, like, I guess if it's to skip to the end, the end is very like, it's not. It seems like it could be a happy ending, but it does end with being like, oh yeah, we're gonna go with the Sentinel program. So it's kind of like did we really stop the shitty future, or did we now move the deadline even farther into the future?
So that's one of the things that really ignited my little kid brain about when I was a kid. Not saying I have anyway. You know, when I read this,
it expanded my brain. It maximized my intelligence after reading it.
I should have presented that, but when I was a kid, I read it, and I read comics with my dad, who also read comics, and he explained to me that it's like a possible future, and I was like, what? I was like, what? But that's the future, and it was like, no, that's not their future. Mm-hmm. It could be, but and even the way they end it, they don't end it like you don't find out what happens in the future. At all. I mean, and they don't. Sorry, what were you gonna?
I was gonna say the comic's still going on today, but yeah, go on.
Well, the comic's still going on, but you don't. You don't immediately find out if they fixed anything. Mm-hmm. I guess Rachel comes back, and you sort of. Yeah. I forget, but for a while at least, you didn't know. Mm-hmm. But the idea is of a possible future, and that your fate isn't determined, but you have this fear in reading X-Men the whole time. And these two issues set up that fear that this hatred of mutants would destroy both humanity, mutants, and the world, because humanity is so hateful in itself, which is like a crazy kind of thing going on, like as a background to everything they ever do,
right? Because
they know if they really screw up, the stakes are that high.
Right.
Which is another thing I think is why this metaphor works so well, because you kind of know instinctually, if you talk about anyone who's from a different kind of background or a minority,
I guess anyone who doesn't, everyone, I guess if you don't have white privilege,
yes, that's if you don't have a certain amount of privilege or something, you understand that that's, if this falls apart, that's it, it's over. Mm-hmm. And I think X-Men always had that, and to an insane extreme. Mm-hmm. Because that's obviously the most, I don't know what's a more extreme thing, to be honest, but than the way they put it, but that's always going on throughout it. And once they added that element, and especially after I think if you read the whole Phoenix thing and then you read those few issues, it kind of calms down a bit. Phoenix did destroy an entire planet and billions of people.
Yeah.
And all this horrible stuff, and they did lose their friend, and spoilers to Dark Phoenix, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
And then all this huge things. The whole team changes. This comic is now the biggest comic in the world. All these things, and they just chill out and they fight a werewolf thing or whatever. And then suddenly they add this crazy element. And I watched a YouTube video. I've heard this before, that one of the people who worked a lot with Claremont was this Louise Simonson, and she said when she called people, they loved the Jean Grey issue, sold like crazy, and people said, "I can't wait." Somebody at some comic book store said, "Man, when Jean Grey died, that sold a lot of issues. I can't wait till everybody dies. Then we're going to sell a lot of issues." And on the second issue of this, it says everybody dies.
Yeah, that's the tagline.
Yeah, which is I think it's funny that they're like, no, you can kill people. It's cool. It's people like that shit. It's
they're not wrong. Everyone technically died. Every Marvel hero that you think it's currently in a movie is technically dead in this issue.
Yeah, I think Rachel's the only one, and Kitty. That's one thing. When I was reading it, I was like, what would it have been like if Kitty Pryde never did come back to the past and she was stuck, they were stuck in each other's bodies? What would that? What's that comic like? I hope someone makes a what if of that.
What if Kitty Pryde got split personality with her older self with younger self?
That her older self never came back. She was just stuck in her younger self.
That's kind of scary. That seems kind of scary, doesn't it?
Sorry, did that freak you out? Was that
no? That doesn't freak me out. It's so you know how the older you get, it seems like time moves faster. So it's when this Kitty Pryde, who's she's 13 or something, right? Or 14.
Yeah, she's young.
Yeah, so she's gained an extra couple of years. Is time just gonna go super fast for her, or it's
oh, that's an interesting way you put that. Yeah, would her perception of how time moves be different.
I wonder if Charles could like, or what happens to the younger Kitty Pryde mind? Is that just kind of like floating in limbo? Right?
No. In this scenario that I've made up, she would just be stuck in the future, and she would wake up and be like horrified.
And
like,
Dad. Or
no, she didn't die. I think she was with Rachel. So her and Rachel Summer.
They never really. Yeah, I don't think they show what really happens to them. But like we see Storm die. They say Colossus dies off screen, and it just shows Rachel. The last like image of kind of like the future back, right? Because there's like two timelines running in this comic. There's like the current X-Men right now, and then them in the bad future, right? And I think the last panel of the bad future, just Rachel hugging like Kitty. So you don't really know what happens to them. Although like the older Kitty just disappears, so I guess that timeline just doesn't exist, right? Technically, maybe they brought it back in a current one. I don't know.
I know they go back to it, but I don't know if it's like that version. I forget the specifics about that. But there's always like this crazy Sentinel future, which is where Bishop comes from and all sorts of stuff. So
yeah. I think I had a point. Okay, so you mentioned something earlier about like kind of like so by default they seen the bad future, and that kind of hangs in their head this whole time, right? I feel like that is kind of like that does kind of work in real life, because technically speaking, like the bad future would be something like a Nazi Germany, right? And so like the whole point of society is to just not revert back to a Nazi Germany like society, right? So we have that hanging over our head, and like so with the whole, I guess, to kind of date this, the current protest and like riot, it's kind of like we're fighting against that almost, right? Or like just trying to make everything slightly better so we don't go in that direction,
Yeah. No, I mean, also remember that sci-fi at the time, and especially the Doctor Who the Doctor Who era that this is based, that this was sort of influenced by, is the Nazi stuff didn't feel that far away to these people.
Oh yeah.
Because like this is like not even 40 years from the end of World War II. So they were reading, and more revelations were coming out and all this stuff. So, and I've even heard the camp they're in, people said, is close to a Nazi concentration camp and stuff. It doesn't seem that extreme, as bad as that in the comic, but they would play with that imagery because they knew at the time, to most people, that seemed like the worst thing in the world, is that coming back at all. And particularly for people in science fiction, that seemed to be something that everyone was very afraid of. And I mean, this has like kind of the is like a buffet of everything they're afraid of: nuclear war, and the Nazis coming back, and their robots. So it's just like it's like everything you could ever hope for.
That's today. That's today. This future came true. 2013.
Yeah, but I don't know. I've always think the good thing about this is it plays as a cautionary tale of like where that can lead. And as cool as like what's good about this story is it's like a cool story, it's a great adventure, all that stuff, but it also like the idea of just like how bad things can get if you let it go that far. And I think that I mean, that plays into maybe, what's funny is like, I feel like because of what's going on, this is almost the perfect time to talk about it, but that's almost like what the plot line is, it's like, that's like what the story is. It's supposed to make you think about those sort of things. And that's what, what I liked about older sci-fi is that you had these writers who wanted to talk more about ideas, and not that everything from the 80s and the 70s was a great story. I'm not gonna claim that.
Not everything. People tend to forget we only remember the good stuff.
Yes. No, there's a lot of, but at the same time, there was a lot of more cautionary stuff that really resonated. And I think, at least for this story, why I even put it above. I know the Phoenix story is another big Claremont thing, and it is crazy. They were having like a crazy period that they put out two of the most classic comic book stories in a row like that. It's just insane to me. But this one, I think why it keeps going is because it shows it like has stayed big in the oeuvre is because it shows you like how far that can go, and it plays into the X-Men thing, and it's a great adventure, but it's like what if they lose the fight? Like what if Charles Xavier's dream is destroyed because he's killed in this too, which is you kind of forget about. You're like,
oh yeah,
because they're like
dead.
Kelly dying is important. Xavier, that'll suck, but you'll get over it. Don't matter. And don't worry about it. You'll be fine.
Yeah, I guess maybe them having the bad future be in 2013 isn't like a bad thing. It's like kind of smart because it's like it's close enough but far away, and I guess it seems like they postponed it, so like any like future stories isn't like clouded by like, oh, whether or not this happened or not, and a lot of like what it is like in real life with the protesting is like we're trying to postpone like the bad future as much as we can, if people like how I mentioned like in the beginning, if like I think I changed my mind on the message that I said at the beginning, that if you want to escape from reality, don't read this comic. I feel like people should probably read this comic more. It's not that hard. It's not that hard to get into.
Funny story about this issue and getting into it right away. So my dad had heard, the end of Dark Phoenix happens, and it's a huge deal in the comic book store, and everyone's talking about X-Men, and people are like, yeah, you should check out X-Men, it's like really good. And it was like, okay. And the first issue, there's no movie, no, he doesn't know who Wolverine is. First issue is the first Days of Future Past, and he was like, yeah, I was reading it, and like everyone's dead, and like future, and they're old, and like what's going on? And he was like, I was just too confused, and I just like didn't pick it up for a while, but he kept that issue, thank God. But it was just hilarious. Like he just didn't. He was like, it's a great, later in retrospect, great story. But at the time, I was like, what is going on in this? Like, because it is like, imagine you don't know any of the X-Men. Like now, I think you can get it because the X-Men are pretty.
Yeah,
big,
they're pretty. Yeah.
Most people, who's Storm and Magneto and all that stuff. But yeah, he had trouble getting into it because it was so. It is a little. Some of the Claremont stuff might work better for newer readers now because you sort of know the basics of people, and it probably isn't as hard as it used to be.
I think a big problem that people kind of have, or I kind of have, is like a run would keep on going, but they'll keep like switching up like writers, So like one writer writes differently than others, or like maybe one writer just kind of like throws an arc potential under the bus or something, or goes like in an opposite direction that you don't like or whatever. With Chris Claremont, that's like 20 years of comics right there. That's it's like, I guess it'd be pretty good to just like read that if you want to get into X-Men. I don't know about any of the current run. I heard the Grant Morrison run wasn't bad either.
I've heard good things. I've never actually read it, and I would like to. One comic that is good if you can get and it's the easiest comic to buy because they overproduced it. The one Jim Lee and Claremont did, the first X-Men.
Oh yeah.
That one's a good general X-Men story with Magneto and Asteroid M and all that stuff like that. To me, like that's maybe the best. Like you get all the characters, the art's really cool, it's a good story. You can get in, have a good adventure, get out.
That one is like, isn't that the comic that sold the most amount ever? Like record breaking amount.
I think it's like 8 million.
Damn, it's
And yeah,
it's. I think I was back to the Cartoonist Kayfabe podcast where I get a lot of my info from old like 90s comics. But they mentioned, they did a joke saying that no one owns like one copy of that. Everyone owns like 5 copies of it.
Well, yeah, because you had the alternate covers, so you had to get like all 4 of the covers. And
didn't it do the thing where like if you put the covers side by side, it's like one image?
Yep.
Oh yeah, even though it's a gimmick, I do kind of love that.
I mean, and then people would buy the poster and all that of the covers. And I mean, but that's a huge achievement of Jim Lee and Chris Claremont, because I think not only were the covers cool, the it was a good book. Like, it was a good issue. I think, I mean, it's not a mind bending.
It's not the most. I feel like Days of the Future Past kind of expands your brain a little bit more than the issue 1 of X-Men with Chris Claremont and Jim Lee. Yeah,
it's. I mean, but I think the difference between that, and I sort of have been thinking a little of Image Comics recently, and how big that was in the 90s, and how little of any of that has
kind of stayed around.
Yeah, it's just like Spawn, and that's it. And I think, and I wouldn't say Spawn's that big right now either way.
Oh, don't worry. That Blumhouse movie is going to make it blow up. You'll see.
You didn't sound very convincing, but...
no, I swear.
I think if someone like a Netflix made like a Wildcat show and did a good job, I actually do think it could be a thing if you got the right people. But like, no, it hasn't permeated at all, and I think it's because those stories just weren't that good. And if you look at that first X-Men issue, we still talk about that a lot. Like, it's still brought up all the time. Like, everyone knows what I'm talking about. And I don't think it's just because of the cover. I do think, and even though, like, I don't think anyone like quotes that story, it's just because it's like a good couple comics. Like, it's a good comic story. It's well drawn. You get Claremont. He's still at the height of his powers. I don't think he ever was able to hit the peaks he was when he was during his Uncanny and X-Men run. I thought he consistently was great during that, but then when he left, it just never was the same to me. But his writing, but like then he knew the characters, his shorthand for them was great, and and that jump started the 90s X-Men boom, and like the designs were even used in the cartoon.
I mean,
exactly. But I couldn't tell you specifics. Like Days of Future Past, I could have not read that comic and still told you everything that happens in it. Whereas those couple issues, I'm like, I don't know, they went to Asteroid M, and like the X-Men were there and stuff. I don't know.
Magneto was at his asteroid, and then like then there's like I've heard summaries of it. There's like another group of evil mutants who want to like join him or something, and then the X-Men fight them.
I think Colossus joins the evil mutant. It's like, it's a thing. I don't know. But if I was Colossus, I would join Magneto's side, because then he's not gonna fuck with you. So
I mean, that's like guaranteed. You could it'd be like Magneto could probably pull a fastball special with Colossus.
Ooh.
If anyone doesn't know what a fastball special, it's like a reoccurring move in the Chris Claremont run where Colossus just froze Wolverine at someone, and Wolverine would just rip him apart, because that's what he does. He's the best.
Yeah,
he's the best at what he does.
I don't think they ever did that in the movies. That's a damn shame.
I think they did that off. Okay, so from little I remember from X-Men 3, in the intro when they're doing the training room, the simulator, I think Colossus does throw Wolverine to a Sentinel that's like off screen, but you never see the actual Sentinel. You only see like the head that's already like ripped apart, right?
Oh yeah, man. There's so many bad X-Men movies. It's like hard to. It's like I remember the ones I like, but there are not many.
It's a shame. It's a shame. The X-Men have been kind of done dirty, although Patrick Stewart as Professor M was pretty good. I like that.
No, it had good casting, but I'm always like, if there's ever a time for like the past 5 years, I'm like, if there's ever a time for someone to make a good X-Men movie, it's like
we need it now.
Yeah, like get your shit together. It's like we need this right now. Please.
If the X-Men movies weren't so shitty, there wouldn't be no alt-right.
Sure.
We got to go back in time and make sure the movies don't suck.
I mean, if I maybe I don't.
Maybe if we go back. We go on.
I wouldn't mind better X-Men movies. I don't know if the stakes are that high, but I like your determination.
We got to go back in time, expose Bryan Singer, early on, and then
I mean, I'm not going to disagree with that. But,
and then he might get replaced with a better director. I don't know, maybe.
well, from what they did, it seems like that was not going to be what they would do. But
oh boy.
although Logan worked out, so you know.
I have yet to see Logan. I want to though.
Oh, you should do that.
Everyone tells me it's the one. That's the one.
That's in my top X-Men. It's like that, X2, Days of Future Past, and First Class would probably be my.
You know, I don't think I was really that big of a fan. You know, to be honest, I'm not really that big of an X-Men fan. To be honest, to come out of the closet of this, I don't dislike X-Men. I think I don't know, just none of the characters really grabbed me. I always been like a Spider-Man guy. Like Spider-Man is the character that I go to the most. But with the X-Men, I just never I don't know, I never really gravitated that hard. Like, I mean, they're cool. They're cool characters, but none of them really ever kind of grabbed me.
Well, they I think were more popular when I was a kid, but I don't think unfortunately, I don't think they've carried on as well.
Yeah, that's a shame.
But Spider-Man's sort of a universal. I mean, I love Spider-Man too, but it's sort of a universal thing at this point.
Yeah, maybe I'm just dumb, and maybe I find it hard to focus on a team. Maybe I just need one character.
I don't think that. I think, everyone gets into what they get into. It's not, it's just,
Yeah, I get you. Okay, so I wanna talk about the one X-Men comics that I really like, and it's X-Men Grand Design. Have you read that comic?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. Well, I won't spoil it too much, but I mean the premise kind of spoil. If you literally read, I feel like you probably already know where this is going if you know about X-Men Grand Design, but it's basically like a documentary style comic about the history of mutants centered around the X-Men, and the way the creator Ed Piskor, who the only reason why I read the comic was because I was already a fan of Ed Piskor, and he was going to do this comic. He also did Hip Hop Family Tree, if you know that comic.
Oh no, I don't.
Oh, okay. That one was one of his I guess bigger hits that not that many people know, because every time I bring it up, no one knows. But I was already a fan of his, and what the Grand Design book is basically like he went through like the complete history of the X-Men comics, all just for all the stuff, everything before Claremont, and like kind of a little stuff after Claremont, and even like the movies and animated series, and he kind of like tried to patched it together to make it seem like it was a singular continuity, right? Because like in real life with like the mainstream American superhero comics, like these runs get new writers, and like there's no real way to make this like long ongoing like story that's consistent if you're gonna have so many writers. So what he does is that he patches them together, and it's like a 6-issue series, and he kind of like streamlined it, right? And what's kind of interesting is that it's like the middle of the book is like the days of future past, but if the bad ending happened. So it's like so imagine if Kitty Pryde's like future self wasn't sent like back in time, and then the rest of the series played out like if that didn't happen, right? So the X-Men at that time didn't know about the Sentinel bad future, right? Like it just played out like that. And then at the end of Grand Design, we get Days of Future Past, and then the book kind of ends like on a loop, right? So it doesn't really like kind of have like an ending. But also, like, the way they portray Days of Future Past is, like, different because he wants to include everything from X-Men history. He also puts, like, Bishop in Days of Future Past. He also, like, has...
Oh, because Bishop's who goes back in time in the animated one.
Yeah. He puts Bishop, he makes... There's, like, also, like, a different time machine in the end of Grand Design, where, also, like, Rachel goes back in time, too. And so it's so that's like kind of how like he like collages like everything like together. And it's a very interesting book. He kind of did that with like his first book called WYSIWYG, which is like it's like a biography of like the first like computer hacker, but it's not based on one hacker. It's like based on like three different hackers, but he morphed them into one character and he made a biography about him.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, he has his own podcast, and it's called Cartoonist Kayfabe, which is the podcast I keep like bringing up. And I think on Twitter I recommended it to you. Yeah. I think I added you for that one.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry if I didn't.
No, it's fine.
But I am gonna check out this Grand Design thing because it sounds cool. I saw it's on the app, so I'll check it out.
Oh, yeah. I think you'll dig it a lot, and because like I'm kind of a sucker for any like kind of like comic series that like details like a history of a fictional like universe, specifically if it's like superhero related. Because I like Marvel by the one by Alex Ross.
Marvel's is great. That's a great one.
Yeah, Marvel's. I know DC had one called like Legacies, which also like details like a whole history.
Yeah.
And I think Marvel recently had like a series called The Complete History of the Marvel Universe, but it's kind of like a big giant info dump of everything that happened, but it's told through the perspective of Galactus telling it to like the adult Franklin Richard. Because like Galactus is gonna die, so they can create a new universe, and Franklin's gonna become the new Galactus, right? So before he dies, he tells Franklin like the complete history, and they just go through like every single little thing, and even though it's just all exposition, like you could read a Wikipedia page and you get all the same info. I don't know, I just love that, I eat that up.
Yeah, those are fun, I remember Marvel's being, even though I knew it all, it was like cool just to see that perspective of it all.
And also there's also another book that's done by Tom Scioli, who I mentioned earlier before, who's doing like the Jack Kirby biography. He did a book called Fantastic Four Grand Design, and that book is like my least favorite Tom Scioli book, because everything else he's written, like Tom Scioli made a comic about GoBots, and that was a really good comic. So just to show you like how much range Tom Scioli has,
what didn't you like about the Fantastic Four one?
It's like the panels in that book are tiny. Like they're like a mail stamped, like a stamp.
Oh.
And like so like in for example in X-Men Grand Design, Ed Piskor doesn't put everything in the book. He kind of like skips over like a lot of things that aren't that important. He just kind of keeps everything to make like a good flow for the story, right? But in Fantastic Four Grand Design, he literally tries to put everything in there, and because it's so much information, he has to keep making his panels like smaller and smaller, and it's so hard to kind of like get into the book. If you read like Tom Scioli's like previous comics, like he draws like crazy stuff that could like cover half the page, that looks all good. Like he made a comic called Transformers vs. G.I. Joe, and that comic is really gorgeous looking. Like every page looks kind of like a poster. Like it would be a really cool, like kind of like neon, like glow in the dark poster. And like seeing that and then reading Fantastic Four Grand Design, it's like it feels like such like a downgrade. Like if I was Tom, I feel like the problem was Tom Scioli. Like X-Men Grand Design was like 6 issues, but Fantastic Four Grand Design was only 2, and I think that was like the big problem. Maybe he should have gone for he should have done 4 issues to go with the Fantastic Four theme,
Yeah. Also, it's a rich history. You can't really do that in 2 issues, in my mind. I haven't read it, but
I mean, there's moments in the book that I like. I think my favorite moments in Fantastic Four Grand Design were the parts where he had to kind of like, the parts where he kind of made it up, because because in Fantastic Four Grand Design there's kind of like an end to the history. Like he actually puts like an end. He like stops at a specific spot, right? So he has to kind of like fan fiction like an ending. Like he makes like Galactus like legit die and like stay dead, right? And if like Galactus is dead in current Marvel universe, right? So he kind of has to like fan fiction like how they kill Galactus, how that all happened, and I think that's my favorite part. And also like in fact, like for grand design, it does kind of end with Days of Future Past, and but what happens is that he calls like so like Franklin, Richard, Storm, Colossus, and Kitty in Fantastic Four in Grand Design, they're called the Franklin's Final Four, right? Because there's the Final Four we have to save like the future, right? And but I think in that I think they changed it where like I think they use like a Doctor Doom's time machine because he also has a time machine, right? And they use that to like go back in time. Yeah, I mean, like if you're like a nerd for Marvel history, you'll probably like it. You'll probably like dig it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know I'm gonna check out X-Men Grand Design. We'll see where I go from there.
Oh yeah, if you check that out, I like all of Ed Piskor's books. They're all good. But yeah, I think that's all. I think I gotta say. Is there anything else you wanted to say about Days of Future Past?
I guess just check it out. I would say read these 2 issues. I like the movie. We didn't really get into it. We don't need to, but I do like the movie. But I will say I still find the 2 issues a lot better, and I think it's a lot quicker than the movie.
Yeah,
so.
you're gonna. It's a breeze. It's a very. It's very. If you've seen the movies, you'll get it because there's like a lot of characters in here who appeared in the movies, and like, like at the end of the day, these books were like written for like kids, so they don't like
Yeah, well, it's like a nice beach read where you understand that hatred will destroy us all, which is, I think, the best.
I mean, I'm not downplaying. What I'm saying is like when a character shows up, the book will tell you who that character is. You're not going to be confused.
Well, I will say in this they only do it in the future because I think they should because you're like you don't want them to be like, who's this old lady? Like what's going on?
I think. Oh wait, hold up. And I'm looking back on the page where they introduce like the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Like every one of them has a caption, I think.
But I also think that's less of the people who read it and more of that you couldn't. It might have been a year since you saw Pyro,
right?
Or Avalanche, or maybe 2 years, or Mystique. You know what I mean? So, although I did like the one thing, the Mystique. Hinting at Nightcrawler about stuff. I was like, I didn't notice that before. That's kind of cool. I like that she's like, ask your mom about it. And like, but then she like technically turns into him, and I was like, that's a little strange, but okay.
Yeah, it's not that. It must not be a difficult transformation for her because they're both blue, as like Nightcrawler points it out. I think Nightcrawler. I remember like me and my friends were talking, and we were saying which one's our favorite X-Men, and I'm like. I don't think I have one, but I remember Nightcrawler existed. Like, oh yeah, I always liked Nightcrawler. I always dig Nightcrawler's design.
No, he's a cool character. He's a cool character.
Yeah, word. But like, I think now I've grown to appreciate almost every X-Men.
Yeah, like it takes you a while to get into all because there's too many. It's like at certain points you like ones and like others.
I think my least favorite is probably Angel.
Yeah, he seems just lame rich dude who lets them fly in his jet. Like
it's like there's not much like wing and flying is so kind of boring, I guess. Like
they got rid of him after a certain point. I kind of didn't. I was like, I forgot he was in this because I just focus on Storm and Colossus and Wolverine and Nightcrawler, and he's just like, "What, bro? What are you doing here?" Like,
I like a character. I mean, I don't mind when a character flies, but I like it better when flying is like a side effect of like their main power. Like Storm could technically fly, but that's because she controls weather, right? So she controls the weather to make her fly. Like.
But also, Storm's really cool. So it's like, he's not cool at all, and you don't. Yeah, you know what? Actually, you bring up a good point because when I'm reading it, I like barely noticed him most of the time.
I forget he's there.
I was like, oh, I'm glad he could let them use his jet. And I think a news reporter's like, oh, he's here? This must mean it's a big deal. And I'm like, does it though? I don't know.
Does that mean that's a big deal?
Do you guys not know who Wolverine is? I don't understand this. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, was Wolverine like the popular character at this point?
Oh yeah, he was pretty I mean, hey, he made both the covers of these issues, so
That is true. Like his death is like the cover of issue 2 of him just getting freaking incinerated.
He was very popular. He was very popular. In fact, this was like right around the time they learned that his claws could come out of his body. Everyone thought it came out of his gloves for a long time, because you never saw him without the gloves on. But
did they ever say that? There's a joke in X-Men Grand. I guess spoilers for X-Men Grand Design, but there's like a joke where like I think Banshee tells Wolverine, "Wait, your claws come from inside your body?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "How come you never told me?" And then Wolverine's like, "You never asked."
I mean, I don't think that. I mean, before you find out, which I think was in the Dark Phoenix thing, you never really. There's never a need to, so they just don't.
Yeah, true but that.
He's just Mr. Badass, you know. This is Wolverine's thing.
Word. Okay, so I think damn, what else is there to talk about the book? I mean, I think we said everything we could.
Yeah, I think we got it.
Yeah. There's a lot of detours in it, but I don't think we ever went on a boring detour, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if you do, you can snip that out, you know.
Right. I guess what we're gonna. I guess I do this on my main podcast, but I guess I could do it here. So Jim, we read this comic. Let's say a viewer read the comic, they watched this podcast, and now they want more. They want more. Where would you want readers to go from here?
Oh man, I should have picked out something with the actual issue numbers because I'm just gonna go, you know, that plot line.
I was gonna say read the rest of Chris Claremont. Yeah, we're gonna say.
I would agree. Like, pick up I would say either, you know, any way you can, legally or not, find those issues. But the Marvel app I do think is really good. I would recommend that if you are just in a general comics thing, and we talked about Fantastic Four a little, the when Galactus shows up, that's kind of classic Kirby, Stanley. That holds up, and the panels in that are insane. So I would say that because that's kind of a world-defining thing. In terms of, I know they did a Days of Future Present, which was a bunch of annuals, and that was all right. But I would say just read more of the Claremont run and read the actual Dark Phoenix thing, because one of the saddest things about the movies is they kept screwing up the Phoenix story, and it's actually not a story that can be covered in one movie. It's like it went on for a long time and was a bunch of different stories and all these things. So if you ever want like a really extensive story, like that is the one, and you get a bunch of little stories, and you see like her become the Dark Phoenix, and you get the Hellfire Club, you get like the gamut of Dazzler shows up, you know, all sorts of crazy shit. It's like, but you'll have a good time. So I would say just read the Claremont run, but specifically the John Byrne Chris Claremont run is just classic in my mind. So what would you say? Or are you gonna say X-Men Grand Design?
Yeah, X-Men Grand Design. It's like the one X-Men book I ever talk about. But I was gonna say, hot take, I unironically like Dazzler as a concept.
That's fine.
I like Dazzler. I know Dazzler gets shit on a lot, but I like her.
What, 70s Dazzler or 80s Dazzler?
I think I like. There's like the one where she's wearing like the little, when everyone had like the little like jacket, you know.
Oh, 80s Dazzler. Yeah.
That one's fine. I do like the 70s one where she has a very like just the disco look. I like corny stuff like that. I'm cool with that.
Hey, that's fine, man. That's a cool character.
Okay, yeah. So, thanks again, Jim, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I think I don't know if anyone's ever told you this, but when I was on the Pizza Party podcast, I mentioned Where's Jim, and I said he was my favorite, and that hurt the feelings of Pan, Nolan, and Izzy when I said that.
Oh, wait, was I not there?
No, you weren't. You weren't there. Have you listened to that episode where I was on? I guess. I mean, it's fine if you haven't.
If it was, I try to listen to them. It's also that there's only so many hours in the day, and I don't really listen to them, you know, other than when I listen to them while they're happening. anymore.
Look,
Not
I
to
mean, like it's fine. Like you're like
yeah.
if people in the audience don't know, Jim is a grown ass man with a family, so he's busy. He's he
But
actually has a life, unlike a lot of people who read
well,
comics.
I will say, okay, first off, let me say this. Let me say this. Thank you. That's very nice of you to say that. Second, um, the only times I do listen to the Pizza Party, and this might sound very cheesy and corny. The only times I listen to it, it is usually when I'm on it, and it's not an ego thing. It's actually just because, it's like my group of friends, and if I'm feeling sort of down, I can just put on an episode and remember, like, hey, remember that time me and my friends were having a good time, and I can just listen to that, and it'll like cheer me up. So that's like, I know that's like really cheesy,
No, this is adorable.
but it's like I've done it. I don't do it every episode, and I don't do it a lot, but I've done it more during quarantine than I've ever done it before.
Oh no, it's fine. I get you.
But it does. It's sometimes, if you're having a rough day, you'd be like, oh, remember when Nolan said that funny thing? And obviously, I could call them and we could talk. And if they hear this,
I want them to say it that specific way.
What?
No, like
No,
it's
no,
not enough to talk to Nolan. He has to say the joke that specific way he said it on that day.
It's more just like the memories of that recording and being like, you know what, at that time that was a good time. And it's sort of like, I don't know, it's hard to describe sometimes, and I don't even usually finish them when I do stuff like that. It's like I got that 30 minutes of positive energy, so. But anyway, I'm sorry if I didn't hear that one.
No, it's fine. I do actually re-listen back to any podcast I was on just to make sure I didn't like sound too much like an idiot or a jerk or something, because that's kind of always going in the back of my mind, like, because so many times friends have told me that, like, oh, that thing you said, it was very like a dick thing to say, and I'm like, oh really, I didn't even realize it. So like, I'm kind of scared sometimes I might come off like an asshole unintentionally or something.
I will say, my first couple of years of doing podcasts a lot and stuff, I did used to do that regularly.
Yeah.
And then it was part because I had a kid, but also part because I realized once you're fine-tuned enough, you just like let it go. You just are like, I don't do I really need, it's like I need to just like be more spontaneous and stuff. But I do think your first couple years or so forth, I don't think it's not helpful. It is helpful. It's sort of like, athletes, I don't know anything about sports, but to my understanding, athletes do watch like game tape afterwards, and it's sort of like that. So I don't just do it to sound stupid, worry about if you sounded stupid or something, but also think of like, oh hey, that joke landed because of this, or that, I said this way, and I think maybe I should try. I don't know. If I rewatch something, I try to think of how to improve other things and try to not do it in a negative way. I hope this isn't over advice for you.
No, it's fine.
This.
It's fine. I get it. It's good advice. I mean, I think because also I just need sometimes I just need something in the background because I'm constantly like working on stuff. I do podcasts as like a side thing. Really, my main thing is like actually making comics. Like is what I do.
Oh, cool. What is your comic?
Okay, I guess this is where we plug our shit before we go.
Oh, okay. Okay. I transitioned that well. Cool.
All right. Good job, Jim. So I'm currently right now I'm doing a comic. It's called VillainVerse. It's about all these crazy, wacky alien villains who all want to prove they're the worst villain ever, because there's like a literal like magical list at the end of the universe that has all their names, and like the closer you are to number one, the more evil you are, right? So they all want to be like the most evilest villain ever. Meanwhile, the number one most evilest villain has this giant, elaborate plan that he's pulling off throughout this whole series, and we don't really know what's gonna be until the very end. But I promise it's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be wacky, and there's currently a prologue and 2 chapters out that you could read for free. Link in the description, right? And there's a chapter. Wait, no, actually, no. It's the prologue and chapter 1 are free to read. Chapter 2, you have to buy, right? But once chapter 3 is finished, I'll put chapter 2 up free to read. Because my plan is to have the whole thing free to read by the end. but you know, I gotta also like make a living, right?
Yeah,
So
you have to eat sometimes.
yeah, exactly. So like, if you want to read the next chapter in advance, you just buy it. There's a link. There's gonna be a link in the description if you want to do that.
Yeah. I'm looking at it right now. It looks cool, man.
Oh, word, awesome. Yeah, you should check that out. The pacing in the comic is really fast. Like chapter one is longer than the prologue, but it feels shorter because like the pacing is a breeze, and I'm not joking. It like really just moves. There's always something going on. Um, but yeah, and I guess what do you want to plug, Jim?
Oh, I'll just plug my YouTube channel. It's just my name, Jim Gisrael. I review movies. I do a weekly stream called Movie Crap Live, and I just talk about movie news and whatever sort of movie stuff I want to talk about. And yeah, like, you know, I review stuff. I do a thing called Every Show Ever, where I pick like either Nickelodeon or Adult Swim or Cartoon Network, and I literally list off every show ever. I just did one on Disney animation or Disney TV animation.
I like that gimmick.
Oh, thank you. No,
just name shows.
it literally started as a joke, and then it like took on a form of its own, and people really like it. And I do all sorts of stuff, but I'm mainly a critic, and I try to, you know, review good stuff, and I put out a consistent amount of content. So, you know, if you don't like one thing, I'll probably have another thing.
Oh yeah, like if you ever watch a movie, you should go to Jim's channel and just search it up to see if he did a review about it. Because I tend to do that a lot, actually. I've been watching a lot more movies.
Cool.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot more movies since quarantine, and I'm like, what's Jim's opinion on this? See if I agree with him. I tend to agree with Jim. I'm more harsh on the Marvel movies, though. I'm not that. I feel like Jim likes the Marvel movies more than I do.
I mean, generally, I'm probably harsher on the ones that I don't know if I really like the Ant-Mans or there's certain ones I don't like, but yeah.
I like the idea of the Ant-Man movies. I'm not really a big fan. I mean, they're alright. Like, Ant-Man and Wasp was alright. It's alright. They're alright.
It's fine. I never think about it, but, but you know.
True that. Okay, yeah, so I guess this is the end of the podcast. Thank you, Jim. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Okay, word. And yeah, I think, this is it.